My father left my mother for his secretary, and now my stepmother is trying to ruin my life. I was 25 when my father left my mother for the woman who used to schedule his conference calls and bring him coffee with that fake little laugh she did. 25. Old enough to keep my mouth shut about it, apparently. Old enough to smile at the wedding, pretend like it wasn't weird that he proposed 6 months after the divorce finalized, and even older now, watching my stepmother try to nest in the house I paid for. The first time she let herself in, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he left something here. Maybe she was dropping something off. Nope. She made herself coffee, sat on my couch, asked if I had oat milk. That was 3 months ago. She started calling it our second home. I corrected her once. The second time I stared. The third, I ignored it. And that's where I messed up. Because she read silence as permission. My father used to do the same thing. My mother used to mistake it for strength. I don't do that anymore. Let's get something straight. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up ignored. There's a difference. My father worked late. My mother paced rooms and whispered things like, "He's just tired." I learned not to need much. By the time he moved out, I had already stopped asking him for anything. When he said he was leaving, I said, "Okay." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just took my mother's keys and drove her to the pharmacy to pick up something for her blood pressure. She didn't speak the whole ride. She didn't look at me. We stood in line and paid like we weren't a family dissolving in real time. That was 5 years ago. She's still living in that apartment with the bad plumbing and beige walls. She says she likes the quiet. I visit her once a week. I pay for her prescriptions. She never asks how my father is, and I never bring it up. She doesn't even say his name anymore. I guess we deal with things the same way. Head down, keep moving. The difference is, I'm done pretending not to care. When I bought this place, it wasn't a statement. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just didn't want to rent anymore. It's a one-story ranch with no yard and too much light in the morning. But it's mine. Every payment came from my account. Every decision, down to the cabinet handles, was mine. And suddenly, this woman who married my father because he gave her a promotion and a ring thinks she gets to take up space in it like she earned something. I didn't let her in the second time. She had a spare key. He gave it to her, just in case. She smiled when she said that, like we were family. Like I was the unreasonable one. She brought towels. She wanted to update the guest bath. I let her in because I didn't want a scene in the driveway. That was the last time I did that. My father always had this way of making people feel like they were overreacting. It's how he got out of every mess. He'd say something like, "I didn't mean it that way," and suddenly you were the difficult one. He taught her that, I think. Or maybe she was always like that, and just needed someone to show her how far she could go. Either way, she kept testing me. She'd come by when I was at work. Leave things behind. A candle. A frame. Once, it was a framed photo of her and my father at Lake Tahoe, like I gave a damn. I started putting them in a box in the closet. Didn't even tell her. I just stopped engaging. My therapist said it was about control. I didn't disagree. Then she called me last week and said she was thinking of using my place to host her book club. Said it would be more central. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first time she'd said it out loud. This idea that she thought she was entitled to my life. I hung up on her. She texted. I didn't answer. Then she showed up again yesterday. I was home. That was her mistake. She used the key like she owned it. Walked in with bags. Shopping bags. I was sitting at the table eating cereal in a shirt I hadn't washed in days. She looked surprised. like I was the one out of place. She said she brought new dish towels, thought I might like them. I told her to put them back in the bag. She blinked like she didn't hear me. I told her she had 5 minutes to get out. She tried to play it soft. Said my father thought this could be a space for all of us. I told her my father hadn't paid for a single tile in this house, and neither had she. She said I was being emotional. That's when I took the key out of her hand and threw it into the trash. Not a word. Just walked over, grabbed it, and dropped it. She watched me like she couldn't believe it. Like I'd broken some invisible rule. I told her not to come back. I told her if she did, I'd call the cops and say she broke in. I don't know if that would have worked, legally, but I didn't care. She said she was going to call my father. I said I didn't care about his opinion. Then I opened the door and waited. She didn't say anything when she left. Didn't slam the door, didn't cry. Just walked out like she was late for something. I stood there until I saw her car pull away. Then I locked the door. Deadbolt too. That night, he called. 10 times. I didn't answer. He didn't leave a voicemail. He never does. He just waits for me to come around. I won't. Not this time. I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not swallowing things to keep the peace. She wanted to play house in a life she didn't build, and now she's locked out of it. Literally. I don't feel guilty. I feel like I should feel guilty. But I don't. And I'm not going to pretend I do just to make someone else comfortable. Let them complain. Let them twist it into something else. I'm done playing the easy daughter. I'm not the problem. I just finally said no out loud. 3 days after I threw her out, I got a letter in the mail with my name handwritten on the envelope, but no return address. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. No greeting. No signature. Just a screenshot of a bank account under my name, with over $80,000 in it. I didn't recognize the account number. Never opened it. Didn't even know the bank. It wasn't mine. I stared at it for a full minute before flipping the page over, like maybe something else would explain it. Nothing. I Googled the bank. It was real. Regional, small, weirdly specific to the area where my father's law office used to be. So I called. Waited through the menu. Gave them the info on the screenshot, and the woman on the line paused like she was typing something she wasn't supposed to see. She asked for verification. I gave her my social, my birthday, my mother's maiden name. Then she told me the account had been opened when I was 17. Joint ownership, me and my father. I didn't say anything. She asked if I wanted to make an appointment. I said no. I hung up and stared at the wall like it might give me a different answer. I don't know what made me do it, but I pulled out my tax forms. Went back 3 years. Nothing on them. Nothing about this account. But it existed. It had my name on it. And the only person who could have opened it with me being underage back then was him. I didn't call him. I didn't want to hear whatever version of the truth he was ready to spin. I went to the branch in person the next morning. The manager looked nervous when I handed her my ID. Said the account hadn't had any withdrawals in years. Just deposits. Regular ones. Like someone was feeding it and letting it grow. She printed the history. The last deposit had been 4 months ago. From one of his shell companies. That's when it clicked. It wasn't just some random account. It was something he set up a long time ago, probably when the marriage with my mom was already falling apart, and he didn't want her to know about the money. And he used my name. I asked for the balance. She gave it to me. Still over 80 grand. Just sitting there. Legally mine. She asked if I wanted to transfer it. I said yes. I left with it all moved into my own account. Password changed. Access sealed. I walked out into the parking lot and just stood there for a second, feeling absolutely nothing. Not grateful. Not excited. Just tired. Then he showed up at my door. He didn't knock. Just stood there with that expression he always had when he wanted to look concerned but also like he was above whatever was happening. I didn't say anything. I opened the door and walked back to the kitchen. He followed like he always did, entitled and quiet, waiting for me to make the first move. He asked why I locked her out. I didn't answer. He asked if I'd checked the account. I asked him why he used my name. He said it was for me. I asked why he didn't tell me. He said he was waiting for the right time. That's when I laughed. He tried to explain. Said it was part of his legacy planning. Said he wanted to make sure I had something if things ever went bad. Said he didn't trust the courts or my mother or whatever. He said a lot of things. None of them sounded like the truth. I asked if she knew about the account. He hesitated. That was all I needed. I told him she sent me the screenshot. His face didn't move, but I watched the muscles in his neck shift. She wanted me to find it. She thought it'd scare me. Or maybe she thought I'd run to him, grateful, desperate to be let in on the secret. She thought she had leverage. What she didn't know was I wasn't afraid of money. I was afraid of being owned. That's the part that always made her angry. She couldn't buy her way into my life. Couldn't guilt me. Couldn't manipulate me into being the grateful stepdaughter. She tried anyway. I told him if either of them ever set foot on my property again, I'd file a restraining order. I told him if he tried to touch that account, I'd take him to court and drag every one of his company names through the mud. He didn't say anything. Just stood there like he was trying to decide whether to be mad or ashamed. Then he said something that made me freeze. He said the money was hers. That she'd been the one putting it in after he gave her control of some of the accounts. He said she insisted on putting it in my name to build trust. Said she thought it would soften me. I asked him if he was lying. He didn't answer. He just looked away and said, "It was a gesture." So now I'm sitting on 80 grand I didn't ask for, that may have come from the woman I just threw out of my house. A gift. A trap. Or maybe both. I don't even know if I care. I already moved it. Already claimed it. It's mine now, no matter who put it there. And maybe that's the real win. Not the money, but the fact that she lost her little power move. She gave me a weapon, and didn't realize I'd use it to cut her off for good. I haven't heard from either of them since. Not yet. But I know it's coming. She doesn't lose quietly. And he doesn't like things he can't control. Let them come. I've got their money in my account, and their key in the trash. And if they think I'm bluffing, they don't know me at all. She finally texted me. It was short. You made your point. Can we talk now? That's it. No name. No emotion. Like we were co-workers who had a scheduling mix-up. Like the last few weeks were just some minor misunderstanding. Not her trying to wedge herself into my life and send a bank account as a threat. I didn't respond. I wasn't playing anymore. I screenshotted it and sent it to myself in an email just in case. I've been doing that a lot lately. Keeping records. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm done letting things slide. People like her count on you getting tired and letting it go. I used to. I don't anymore. The silence after that was different. It wasn't peace. It was unfinished. Like when someone leaves a party without saying goodbye, but you know they'll bring it up later just to make it awkward for everyone. I kept expecting something else. A letter. A package. Her showing up again. But nothing happened. Days passed. Then a couple weeks. And life kept moving, even though I felt like I hadn't. I went back to work. Answered emails. Paid my bills. Took my mom to her doctor appointment. We sat in the waiting room for an hour, and didn't say much. She asked if I was still seeing that guy, and I told her it ended months ago. She nodded like she already knew. We don't talk about feelings. Just logistics. It's always been that way. Back at home, I cleared out the hall closet. Found the box of things she'd left behind. The frame, the candles, a cardigan that still smelled like her perfume. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it in the street. I just packed it up tighter and put it in the storage bin in the garage. She doesn't get a scene. A week after that, my dad emailed me. I didn't even know he still had my email. It was long. All lowercase. A mess of half-sincere lines about miscommunication and, "You know she means well," and, "None of this had to be ugly." He ended it with something about how he hoped I'd use the money wisely. Like that was what mattered. Like this whole thing could be wrapped up in a polite bow now that they'd said their version of sorry. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I'd say, and it wouldn't change anything. People like him, they don't listen. They just wait for you to quiet down. They think that's the same as forgiveness. So I didn't write back. I started looking for a new place instead. Not because they won. Not because I felt unsafe. But because I didn't want to live in a space that had their fingerprints on it anymore. I had worked too hard to get this house. But it stopped feeling like mine the moment she walked in and started talking about towels. I don't want to fight to reclaim something that should have always been mine to begin with. I found a smaller place on the edge of town. Older. Nothing fancy. But it's quiet. And nobody else has a key. I moved last weekend. Did it alone. Took 3 trips with the U-Haul and a bad playlist. My back still hurts. I don't care. It felt good to leave without telling anyone. I didn't even clean out the fridge. I left the eggs and the ketchup and the bottle of cheap white wine she brought over last month that I never opened. Let it all rot. Let them go back and wonder where I went. Let them deal with it. I told the realtor to hand over the keys to the buyers directly. No open house, no walkthrough. I didn't want to see anyone pretending to imagine their life there. I already spent enough time watching someone else try to shove themselves into mine.